But moving forward, I think kind of tying in what we were talking about a little bit, what you were saying, Secret, about Kamala Harris, I think that this new criminal justice reform push, and if you haven't heard about it, Donald Trump has been pushing a criminal justice reform bill that he wants to get in before the Senate goes home for Christmas break, and until the whole new Congress comes in. So, frankly, so they can get credit for passing this when the Democratic House isn't there and when it's Republican House and Republican Senate. And this criminal justice reform bill has been pushed. Jared Kushner has urged it to go through. Trump has really taken up the mantle, especially on Twitter, in trying to make sure that we get that done. And there seems to be some problems with Mitch McConnell saying that it may not be able to be passed feasibly by the end of the year. And then you have Democrats and also libertarians like Rand Paul coming out and saying, no, they can just attach it to the spending bill and they can push it through. And so we're seeing kind of a fight grow through. But we've even seen people like Ted Cruz come out and say that the Senate should take up and pass this legislation. And so we're actually seeing a lot of bipartisan work here. And I appreciate what you said about Kamala Harris and a lot of these other Democrats and kind of their ideas regarding the legalization of marijuana and a lot of these other policies that would be a step in the right direction for criminal justice reform. But I want to turn it around to you and ask you, Secret, do you think that this kind of criminal justice reform can happen in the Trump era?
Well, let's talk about the legalization of marijuana. Right now, people tend to say that this is a major reason for over-incarceration. We know that the money spent on inmates is staggering. It's about $30,000 per person annually. And in 2016, we had 587,700 marijuana arrests.
Wow.
Now, those people are not being
just in 1 year?
Incarcerated. That's in 1 year.
Wow.
There's actually somebody arrested for marijuana possession about 1 per minute, which is just crazy. The issue, though, is, if we're talking prison reform, is the over-incarceration, right? We are trying to figure out why our prisons are so full. What's going on with these for-profit prison systems, and how do we reform this system that we have in America, because it's obviously not working. So here's where we're at. A lot of people are shouting about this legalization of marijuana, and I do think that it should be legalized, or at the very least decriminalized, and I don't think that people should be in jail for marijuana possession. But you're talking about, out of 2.3 million prisoners in the United States, you're talking about less than 0.5% of those people being imprisoned for marijuana possession.
Well, I think you also have to think about nonviolent drug offenses, but yes.
Yes, but is this a problem because of marijuana? No. Now, here, the thing, though, is that, so you have 21 to 25% of your people that are in prison currently or being detained. So this is also the state jails and the county jails. You have 21 to 25% of those people who are incarcerated because of drug-related crimes. Now, only 3 to 4% of those people are incarcerated for some sort of a non-violent drug possession crime. 3 to 4%, okay? So if we take all of these people out of jails and we just released them, this is really not going to put any sort of a dent. You're talking 3% of the prison population that falls under these two categories. This is not why we're over incarcerated. The biggest portion of the prison population is locked up for violent crimes, okay? This is 41% of the people. Almost 1 million inmates are in prison for violent crimes, okay? So here's where it gets a little bit dicey, and here's where the big controversy with this particular bill comes in. Sorry, let me gather my thoughts for a second. You're on pins and needles.
Yeah, I just can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so what we have to do is obviously rehabilitate people, right? There is, of course, a controversy with these 42% or a million people that are violent criminals. Okay, these are people that you can't just release back into society. There's some argument about the rate of criminal activity decreasing with men after they get out of their 20s, and so even though someone commits a violent crime in their 20s, they should still be able to be rehabilitated. There's a lot of controversy with the Bill Clinton bill and the crime bill that he passed with the 3-strike system. This system said was that if you committed 2 violent crimes that were violent felonies, and then you were released, and if you committed a 3rd violent felony, it was a mandatory life sentence for a 3rd violent felony. I mean, one could argue that this is not an unreasonable thing, right? For 3 violent crimes. So let's push those 42% kind of aside and out of this equation for right now, because that's very controversial. I actually read a stat today that said that from the argument of violent offenders being released back into the general population, that these people should be rehabilitated because less than 1% of people that have committed homicide commit another homicide. This is a real statistic.
Wow.
Did you hear that? I didn't even know what to think about that one. But I had to mention it. I thought it was worth the mention that less than 1% of people that have committed a homicide that are released commit another homicide. Anyway, pushing those 42% aside and dealing with the other 48% of the prison population in this new crime bill, that the prison reform bill deals largely with reforming and rehabilitating these criminals so that they can be productive members of society. That's the big shtick with this bill, which it sounds fantastic on the surface. The controversy comes in when you realize that the private for-profit prison system in the U.S. is plagued by corruption.
Right.
So basically, the country's largest detention company is called the GEO Group. Okay, this company is lobbying on behalf of this bill. They want this to pass. So
interesting.
That's weird,
that's
right?
Yeah, that is
very
really interesting.
The reason that they want this to pass is that they have just expanded their company to include rehabilitation services. So you have a for-profit prison company who is now going to also offer for-profit rehabilitation programs. I'm not saying that they have nefarious motives, but I'm not saying that they don't. If this goes through, it's going to require tremendous oversight.
Exactly.
This company, the GEO Group, has been embroiled in controversy. They are known for having substandard living arrangements inside these prison systems. Their prisons are dirty. People have gotten sick there. They had one youth prison that was shut down and called by a federal judge the worst and most abhorrent thing they have ever seen in the nation. They shut this prison down and moved these kids out of this facility and into another. But they had another prison where they were basically giving the mayor or the governor, I think it was the mayor of this town, they were giving him kickbacks, financial kickbacks. They were giving him money to sentence kids to jail time so that they would fill beds in this youth prison. This guy was eventually convicted of this and sentenced to over 20 years in prison himself. So this GEO Group, this is very controversial, and it's understandable that senators like Marco Rubio are being very mum on this entire bill. You know, they're not coming out to support, not really condemning the bill either, just being very hush hush on what it is that they're going to do until we have some more information. And so I just think the whole thing is interesting. Like I said, I don't know if their motives are nefarious or not, but if this goes through, it will require a tremendous amount of oversight.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it really is true, though. When you look up this crime bill, you can't quite find the specifics. You don't know what the outcomes of this bill will be like. And it's so interesting to hear that. If you want to delve deeper into this issue, and it is an issue that I'm sure we'll talk about for many podcasts to come, I'm hoping that this bill is actually a step in the right direction. Obviously, it really only starts to chip away if it's being presented in a correct way, if it will actually improve the system. But I think that it's something that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. And I think there's a lot of people that are still kind of going along with the Nixon law and order viewpoint and the whole 3 strikes you're out things, and we're really stuck on that when we should be talking about so many issues like the ones that you just presented, Secret, that are bipartisan, something that we can do together. And I think that if you really want to look into this and learn more, there's a great documentary called 13th. It's on Netflix. And it's absolutely incredible. It deals with this issue, the history of it, how we got to where we are today. It's not just an issue of talking about percentages of people that are in for violent crimes, but it's also, how did we get here? Why are these people committing these crimes? And what can we do about it going forward? So that is definitely your homework. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you didn't think you'd get homework, but you need to go watch that documentary. It's incredible.